Hey, peace. What's happening, everyone? On our deal with.
Recognize royalty. Recognize royalty. Gotta recognize it. Recognize royalty. Like they ain't got eyes to recognize royalty.
So today I want to talk about the switch from Negro to Black, from Black people in America being referred to as Negro on official government forms to Black. Just what that shift looked like, and whether or not it's similar to the movement today to move from African American to ADOS or FPA. Just to kind of compare them and again see if there's anything we can see in the similarities or even the differences. So I asked ChatGPT, explain the movement to replace Negro with Black. And it says, the shift from Negro to Black wasn't just a vocabulary change. It was a political, cultural, and intellectual movement tied to self-definition, dignity, internationalism, and intra-diaspora identity. 1. How Negro became the standard term, the 1900s to 1950s. Before we talk about replacing it, it helps to know what it replaced. 1. Colored, in the 19th to early 20th century. Dominant in Reconstruction era civil rights organizations. NAACP is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, founded in 1909. And colored reflects a polite euphemism style. 2. Negro emerges in the 1920s to the 1950s. Championed by Black elites Du Bois, Washington, and Garvey. It was considered modern, respectable, and scientific at the time. It was used consistently by U.S. government, census, military, and OMB labels, Black newspapers, HBCUs, and civil rights leaders. So before the 1960s, Negro was not seen as derogatory. It was the self-chosen intellectual term of the era. 2. Why Negro fell out of favor. This is the key part. The term gets attacked on 4 main fronts beginning in the late 1950s. A. Political critique. Civil rights to Black power. By the late 1960s, SNCC, CORE, and later Black Panther or Black Power currents argued that Negro equals passive, submissive, and assimilationist, while Black equals assertive, autonomous, and political. This shift had real ideological meaning. The term and its connotation. The term Negro was about integration and respectability. The term Black was about power, dignity, revolt, and solidarity. B. Cultural and psychological critique. Influenced by Fanon, Carmichael, Du Bois, and African anti-colonial movements, Negro was seen as a colonial word imposed by Europeans. Black reclaimed as a cultural and aesthetic identity. Black is beautiful. This links directly to Afro hairstyles, African names, African cultural motifs, and diaspora pride. So it appears like using the term Black, even though it was a Black power movement, it was also tied to Africa. It was tied to African pride and diaspora pride, and a connection to Africa and the diaspora. C. International diaspora influence, and as I say that, African independence movements from 1957 to 1975 influenced U.S. Black youth. Newly independent African countries regularly use Black African, Black world, Black people, Black diaspora. SNCC or Carmichael's slogan, Black Power, was global, and it was tied to Nkrumah in Ghana, Nyerere in Tanzania, Third World Socialism, and anti-colonial struggles. D. Indoctrination versus self-naming. A core psychological point. Names given by outsiders to names chosen by insiders. This theme reappears later in Afro-American, African-American, and ADOS or FBA. So the debate about naming never really stopped, it just evolves. But what's interesting to me here is, the fact that going from Negro to Black was a connection to Africa and connecting to the diaspora. And that makes sense when we see that it's people like organizations like SNCC, which was led by Stokely Carmichael, who was absolutely all about Africa. He definitely was a Pan-Africanist, and he wanted a connection to Africa. And I think, and it appears he thinks using the term Black gave him that connection. So when certain people today in the FBA movement try to say that Black Americans are the only Blacks and they are the only ones to refer to themselves as Black, that's kind of weird, given what we know about the history of the word and why it was even used in the first place. 3. The key moment, late 1960s to early 1970s. The term flips fast. In 1966, Black Power enters mainstream. 1968 to 1972, Black becomes standard in media, academia, and pop culture. In 1972, Jesse Jackson says, "Black is beautiful." And in the 1970s, census universities and newspapers officially adopt Black. Within 5 to 7 years, a 50-year terminology regime collapses. And interestingly enough, Jesse Jackson, who later on wanted to move away from Black, was instrumental in the shift. He played a strong role in Black being used in the first place, which is just interesting. Number 4, why Black won and why not African American yet? Black won because it fit the political moment, the revolt era. It fit the cultural moment, identity aesthetic. It was flexible for diaspora solidarity, and it worked for pan-Black messaging globally. It operated without needing genealogical precision. And, the ones that stand out for me given today's climate is that it was flexible for diaspora solidarity and it worked for pan-Black messaging globally. So it was about connecting Black Americans with Black people across the world. However, it did not solve nationality, lineage, citizenship status, diaspora differentiation. That problem resurfaces later, in the 1990s till now, and is exactly where current lineage movements like FBA, ADOS, and Freedmen re-enter the debate. 5. What replacing Negro with Black did on 3 levels. On the psychological level, it gave dignity and positive valuation of Black. On the political level, it gave movement, language, plus Black power. On the cultural level, it was aesthetics and Afrocentric style. And on the diaspora level, it represented transnational solidarity. 6. The unresolved questions, relevant to today's lineage debates. Replacing Negro did not resolve 1. Who counts as Black in America? Race category versus ethnic lineage. 2. Are immigrants and descendants of U.S. slaves the same group? This explodes in the 2000s to 2020s. 3. Is Black a racial term or an ethnic term? Ongoing census or OMB debate now. And 4. Should a lineage category replace the broad racial category, ADOS or FBA, to Freedmen framework? 7. Connection to African American in the 1980s. Jesse Jackson proposes African American in 1988 to 89, partly because Black equals race, African American equals ethnicity, nationality formation. But even that didn't fully solve lineage precision. Hence, ADOS, FBA, Friedman, BTP, or lineage projects, reparations frameworks. So the trajectory is Negro to Black to African American to lineage-based labels. I asked ChatGPT to go a little bit deeper into how immigrants interacted with the term Black post-1965. And it says, 1, before 1965, immigration from Africa and the Caribbean to the US was very small. So Black and everyday American usage basically meant US-born descendants of American slavery, the freedman tradition. Even though nobody used freedmen as a political identity in the mid-20th century, functionally, that's who the population was. After 1965, with the Hart-Celler Act, massively increases immigration from Jamaica, Trinidad, Haiti, Nigeria, Ghana, Ethiopia, Cape Verde, and later Central Africa. By the 1900s to 2000s, you have children of Caribbean immigrants, children of African immigrants, Black dual citizens, Afro-Latinos, and biracial groups, all entering the same racial category, Black, but not the same lineage or economic or social history within the US. 3. Black as a race does not equal shared history. This new racial umbrella included people who never experienced Jim Crow, never experienced slavery in the US, never experienced the Great Migration, never experienced redlining, COINTELPRO, or the 1980s crack policy, etc. So the main critique becomes the term Black collapses distinct groups into a single category. Number 4, policy implications. Once immigrants are counted as Black, they enter affirmative action pools. They enter diversity recruitment pools. They enter higher ed stats. They enter wealth and income stats. And they enter health disparity stats. But those policies were originally designed for descendants of US slave lineage, not pan-diaspora. This sets up an identity tension that did not exist in the 1930s to the 50s, Negro era. 5. Cultural implications. The cultural category Black also shifts. By the 1990s to 2010s, public Black identity includes Caribbean immigrants in politics, Sharpton versus Caribbean blocs in NYC, African immigrant elites in academia, Afro-Latinos in entertainment, Nigerian or Cape Verdean athletes, Pan-African student groups. This broadens Black away from solely US lineage, which creates tensions around cultural representation, gatekeeping, who speaks for Black America, who directs policy demands, who receives reparation benefits. All of that becomes visible by the 2010s. 6. So what did the lineage movements do? Lineage movements, ADOS, FBA, Friedman, are basically attempting to re-separate the historical US group from the modern racial umbrella. They argue race does not equal lineage, lineage does not equal diaspora. Policy should target lineage, not color. How census or OMB dealt with the shift from Black to Negro. This part is just as important, but for bureaucratic and legal reasons. 1. Census during Negro era, the 1900 to 1970. The census classified Negro as a racial category. There were no nationality, lineage, diaspora distinctions because they didn't exist in the population at scale yet. 2. 1970s to 1980s transition. Following the Black Power era, media adopts Black, universities adopt Black, activists adopt Black. The government follows later. In the 1977 OMB Directive 15 formalizes Black or Negro. This is a slow shift. The government rarely moves as fast as movements do. 3. The government problem. The OMB faced a question nobody had ever confronted. Is Black a race, an ethnicity, or a nationality? They decide race equals Black. Ethnicity is not defined. Lineage is not tracked. Nationality is not relevant. Diaspora origin is not tracked. So that was the OMB's decision. And let me say that again. Let me read that again. According to the OMB, the race is Black, the ethnicity is not defined, lineage is not tracked, nationality is not relevant, and diaspora origin is also not tracked. This simplifies race for statistics, but makes lineage invisible. 4. When immigrants show up in the 1980 to 2000, once African and Caribbean immigrants enter the system, OMB must decide, should they count as Black? They chose yes, the racial phenotype approach. But this produces technical distortions in income statistics, education statistics, crime statistics, small business ownership stats, college admissions, affirmative action metrics. Because immigrant cohorts often have different socioeconomic profiles than U.S. freedmen descendants. So the OMB decided to put them all under the Black race umbrella. And of course, that created the problems that we see now. Number 5, the census origin modification. The way to fix Latino counting was Hispanic equals ethnicity and race is chosen separately. But the government never created a parallel. Black equals ethnicity, example freedmen, separate from race. So Latinos get both race tracking and origin tracking. Black Americans got only race tracking. This asymmetry becomes a major driver of modern lineage debates. So they didn't do it for Blacks. And in the previous video, about Jesse Jackson and African American delineation, we spoke about why the government chose to, make subdivisions for Latinos, but not for Blacks. And when you get a chance, you may want to watch that video. It's also a very interesting video. It's the Jesse Jackson and the African American delineation. Number 6, modern OMB debates in the 2020s to the present. This is extremely relevant to the FBA ADOS movement. Recent proposals consider Black as race, freedmen or descendant as lineage, and African or Caribbean as origin. This would create a 3-layer breakdown. 1, race, Black. 2, lineage, descendant versus non-descendant. And 3, origin, African or Caribbean or Afro-Latino, etc. That structure solves most of the disputes about reparations eligibility, affirmative action targeting, disparity analysis, DEI and HR claims, cultural representation debates. This is exactly what lineage movements want, not because they reject Black, but because it's insufficient as a policy identifier. Where B and C intersect. This is the key insight. Immigration stress tests the racial category. OMB bureaucratic choices freeze it into law, and lineage movements emerge to fix misalignments. Historical sequence. 1, Negro is coherent lineage and culture in pre-1965. 2, Black is a broad racial umbrella from 65 to 1990. 3, immigration. The umbrella becomes multi-lineage from 1990 to 2010. And 4, reparations debates. Lineage resurfaces in 2010 to 2025. Finally, because this, for me anyway, and with my experiences with people online, I asked ChatGPT to speak more about how adopting the term Black was influenced by Africa and the diaspora. It says, absolutely, this part often gets flattened in US-centric histories, but the shift from Negro to Black was deeply shaped by Africa and the broader diaspora. and it had multiple channels of influence: political, cultural, psychological, and aesthetic. Let's break it into the main mechanisms. 1. Anti-colonial Africa as a model for renaming and self-definition. 1957 to 1975 is the wave of African independence. Ghana in 57, Guinea in 1958, Nigeria in 1960, Congo in 1960, Kenya in 1963, Tanzania in 1964, Angola or Mozambique in 1975. These movements reframed Black from a colonial descriptor to a political identity tied to liberation. Leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Sekou Touré, Patrice Lumumba spoke of a Black world, Black Africa, Black unity, and Black consciousness. These words traveled through newspapers, embassies, students, Pan-African conferences, political exiles, UN speeches, and eventually into U.S. intellectual spaces. 2. Pan-Africanism as an intellectual bridge. Figures like Du Bois, George Padmore, C.L.R. James, Marcus Garvey had already laid a Pan-African groundwork earlier in the 1910s to 1940s, but it hits differently once Africa becomes sovereign rather than colonial subject. For U.S. Negroes, this shift means we are not a color minority in America. We are part of a global Black majority. That thought experiment kills the minority inferiority psychology tied to the Negro framework. So it was important, the term Black was important for Blacks in America because it tied them to the global Black movement and made them no longer a minority and not having that minority inferiority. And that's powerful. There really could be no Black power without a Black majority. And there couldn't be a Black majority without Black Americans unifying with Africa and the African diaspora. And that cannot be overstated as, when we talk about why the term Black was adopted, because I think that's the most powerful aspect of it. 3. Diaspora student networks in the U.S. Black students from Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Ethiopia, Trinidad, Jamaica, Barbados, Haiti interacted with U.S. Black students on campuses in the 1950s and 1970s. They brought anti-imperial framing, nationalist framing, third world framing, socialist framing, anti-colonial rhetoric. Terms like Black and African came through these networks long before Jesse Jackson proposes African American. SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, was especially influenced by students who had African or Caribbean family backgrounds. 4. The Caribbean influence. Caribbean radicals are essential to this language shift. Frantz Fanon of Martinique and Algeria, Black alienation, decolonization psychology. Stokely Carmichael of Trinidad and SNCC and the Black Panthers had the Black Power slogan. C.L.R. James and Padmore of Trinidad spoke of Pan-Africanism and anti-colonialism. Walter Rodney in Guyana spoke of how Europe undeveloped Africa. Caribbean thinkers reframed Black as global to colonized to insurgent to modern, not the old U.S. frame, racial minority to petitioning for inclusion. This shift was ideological. 5. The aesthetic influence. Black is beautiful. African and Caribbean cultural influence shaped the aesthetic of Blackness. Afro hairstyles rooted in African presentation. Dashikis and kente cloth, West African textile traditions, drums and rhythm motifs, diasporic continuity. Names, African, Arabic, Swahili adoption. Symbolic color palette, red, black, and green, Garvey and Pan-Africanism. Art museums, African modernism influences Black arts movement. This is important because naming is rarely just linguistic. It's aesthetic, sensory, embodied. Negro was never aestheticized. Black became aestheticized. So the Caribbean and African influence in getting the word Black being used in America is tremendous. Without that, it would never have happened. They were referring to themselves as Black before Americans were, before Black Americans were, particularly in a political and unifying way. So for now, for FBA today to be talking about they're the only Blacks is just a rewriting of history. It's nothing more than a rewriting of history. And, and it kind of proves again that they're on the wrong side of history again. Number 6, the psychological influence, Black as a majority. African independence introduces a demographic truth. In the world system, Black people are a majority, not a minority. This flips the majority-minority psychology that burdened the Negro category. Du Bois understood this early. He leaves for Ghana in 1961 for that reason. And that too is also powerful. That psychological shift is incredible and is a major part of Black consciousness today. Number 7, the Cold War frame. Third world solidarity. Black Americans, Africans, and Caribbeans begin to communicate using third world language, self-determination, anti-imperialism, anti-capitalist critique, anti-colonial rhetoric. This matters because Negro was a domestic civil rights term. Black became a global liberation term. 7. Diaspora identification versus U.S. lineage. The shift to Black increased diaspora solidarity and not diaspora differentiation. The shift to Black increased diaspora solidarity, not diaspora differentiation. And that's what it was meant to do. Black as a term was meant to create solidarity across the diaspora, not differentiation. So to now be using it as differentiation or delineation is just weird. Meaning, it unified global Black peoples symbolically, but it buried the specific U.S. lineage, Friedman, ADOS, FBA. This is why the Black to African American to lineage sequence appears later. Negro, U.S. lineage by default, to Black, diaspora solidarity, to African American, ethnicity formation attempt, to ADOS or FBA, lineage recovery. The Black era is the diaspora bridge. The lineage era is the resort. So the lineage era is a resort back to the Negro African American framing. 9. The key insight. Replacing Negro with Black was not simply about U.S. civil rights. It was about locating African Americans in a global system, reframing them as participants in anti-colonial movements, adopting majority consciousness instead of minority consciousness, and switching from petitioning to self-determination. Africa was the template, the Caribbean was the translator, and U.S. Black youth were the implementers. Africa was the template, the Caribbean was the translator, and U.S. Black youth were the implementers. So there's no separating Black from Africa and the Caribbean. There's no way that that today's Black youth, who were the implementers then, are going to say they're the ones that came up with this, and it's really just for them. And it was something used to delineate. They came up with it. They're the first to come up with it. That is, like I said before, that's a rewriting of history. And it doesn't represent the truth of what really happens and the truth of what the word black truly symbolizes. So with that said, I think that's a pretty good place to end this video. You know, the usual, if you like the video, like the video. If you didn't like the video, still like the video. Just hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Gonna have more videos, and hit that notification bell. And you done know. We're gonna catch you on the next one. Peace.
I want you to listen very, very carefully.
Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. Brought us from the motherland in bondage and chains. Bury our culture and change our names. They claim we're free, yet we are in pain. As long as there's life, there's a lot to gain. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. When God spoke his words, they said he was deranged. Marley sung his songs, they said the same. Malcolm X and Martin Luther fought relentlessly so we could be better. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. Brought us from the motherland in bondage and chains. Bury our culture and change our names. They claim we're free, yet we are in pain. As long as there's life, there's a lot to gain. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise. Just because we're black, they say we are slaves. Speak of righteousness, they say we are praise.